Hello, everybody, wherever you are. I guess we'll maybe wait another couple minutes before we get started, as I see that more and more people are connecting. I'll give it another minute. All right, 3 minutes, I guess we can get started. My name is Corinne Mellul. I'm head of research in the Foresight unit of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, or IFCU. And I'm here today to give you a few insights about the impact that the coronavirus pandemic may have on higher education in the short to medium term. I'll be speaking for about 20 minutes, then answering questions if you have any that you can ask on the chat. And I recommend that you stay tuned at the end for a special message from François Mabi, who is the Secretary General of the Federation, to member universities and colleges. I also want to mention that those of you in attendance who belong to member universities and colleges will receive a PDF copy of IFCU's 2019 Annual Foresight Report, which I authored. To begin with, I actually need to tell you a little bit about this report and show you in what ways it may connect with our subject today, though it was completed at the end of last year. Here's a view. I'm going to go into share screen mode. Here is a view of the cover of this 2018 report. So my talk will have two main parts. First, I'll focus for a moment on this 2019 report and give you a few highlights. And then I'll show in a second part how we could reflect back today on some of the questions raised in the report in light, of course, of the current COVID-19 pandemic, which began to develop, I have to stress, several weeks after the report was completed. First, a word about this 2019 report, actually the second annual report IFCU has published for the benefit of its members. Along with the first issue published in 2018, what these reports do is provide a global picture of the most significant trends that are emerging across the planet, mainly in the field of higher education, of course, but also in the labor market, the latter to better address the question of how universities and colleges are adapting their offer to the fast-changing needs of the workplace. If you will allow me, I will take a second to see, because I see people in waiting room and wondering whether, yes, I have to admit, okay. I have to admit everybody, okay. So we'll start all over again, I guess. Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yes, good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Guess what just happened? I assumed everybody was in already, and so I did not click to allow people in the meeting room to actually connect and listen to me, but I had already started. Apparently, I'm one of these people who need no audience at all in order to speak, okay? Everybody can hear me now, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll go back to the beginning. I had started for about 3-4 minutes anyway, so not that much. Let me stop this share screen mode, because you don't know what I'm showing you. Okay, somebody else waiting. Okay, so I suggest we give it another couple minutes, because I see there are more people connecting and in the waiting room. So I have to keep admitting Everybody. Okay. All right. I'll stop the share screen mode in the meantime. Okay. I think we're all set now. Yeah, we are. All right. So let me start all over again, okay? So hello again, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Corinne Mellul. I'm head of research at the Foresight Unit of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, or IFCU. And what I want to do today is give you a few insights about the impact that the coronavirus pandemic may have on higher education in the, say, short to medium term. I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes, and then I'll be answering questions if you have any. You can ask them via the chat. And I suggest that you stay tuned at the end for an additional few minutes for a special message from François Mabi, the Secretary General of the Federation. May I suggest that you mute your microphone while you're not using it, because otherwise I get background noise, and that's a little bit disturbing. Everyone? Okay. Can you please just mute your microphone so we don't get background noise? Okay, guess we'll have to live with that. So where was I? Okay, so my talk will last for about roughly 20 minutes. Then I'll answer questions via the chat if you have any. And then again, IFCU Secretary General François Mabi will say a few words to you when I'm done, that he will address to those among you who are from member universities and colleges, okay? Last thing I want to stress, because I'm going to talk about this 2019 report a little bit, is that those of you who indeed are represent member universities and colleges will receive a PDF copy of the report, which I authored. So to begin with, I'm actually going to need to tell you a little bit about the report and show you in what ways it may connect with our subject today. Despite the fact, I have to stress that it was completed at the end of last year. I was showing you, as everybody slowly joined in, I was showing you a copy of the cover of the report, which you can see here. Sorry, I just want to put it in full screen mode. There it is. So my talk will have two main parts. First, I'll focus for a moment on this report, the 2019 report, give you a few highlights. Then I'll show how we can reflect back today on some of the questions raised in the report in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic, which began to develop several weeks after the report was completed, I have to stress. First, a word about this 2019 report, which is the second annual report IFCU has published for the benefit of its members. Along with the first issue published in 2018, sorry. What these reports do is provide a global picture of the most significant trends that are emerging across the planet, mainly in the field of higher education, but also in the labor market, the latter to better address the question of how universities and colleges are adapting their offer to the fast-changing needs of the workplace. Because these two reports, which are our annual reports published to date, 2018 and 2019, complement each other to a great extent, we have also just published them in a single volume available for now only in PDF format, waiting for the paper print version, but that will take a while. I'm sure you can guess why. You can see here a view of the cover also for this double report. The 2018 report offered a broad picture of evolving trends in universities and colleges across the world on one hand, and in labor on the other, mainly under the impact of the technologies associated with the fourth industrial revolution. These trends were examined against the backdrop of the internationalization and commodification waves that had already transformed the field of higher education, sometimes beyond recognition, over the past 2 or 3 decades. And what the 2019, I'll go back to face-to-face, stop the, okay, we are. Oh, I didn't share the screen. Okay, so you didn't see the slides with the covers of the reports. I'll show them at the end, okay? I'm still relatively new to this, like many of us, but we're learning very, very fast given the circumstances. What the 2019 report does is zero in on some of the higher ed trends described in the 2018 edition, both in terms of learning and teaching approaches and of content taught, and raise some questions as to where they're taking higher education, toward what new practices, what new missions, to whose benefit. For example, one of my significant claims in this report is that the learning experience is being drastically redefined by tech-assisted approaches with educational added value and gains in terms of outcomes that vastly remain to be demonstrated. What I'm talking about here, of course, is primarily the rapid expansion of what is broadly called e-learning, which spans a vast spectrum of approaches, from the flipped classroom that still includes a face-to-face component, to hybrid learning or blended learning, which combines face-to-face with entire modules taught and learned online, and goes all the way, of course, to the ever-growing offer of entire programs, degree programs that can be taken remotely without ever having to go to a physical classroom. The report also discusses the very broad trend whose rise dates back to a couple of decades and is in part associated with EdTech, of smoothing the learning process, making studying and learning ever easier for an ever increasing number of students, in part by relying on the use of data to customize programs and learning paths to the needs. Yes, oui.
Corinne, est-ce que vous, excusez-moi, mais je pense que il faut que vous passiez sur votre ordinateur une manipulation pour qu'on ne voit que vous et pas d'autres personnes, et que vous annuliez les micros de toutes les autres personnes, sinon c'est infernal.
Oui, mais...
Alors... quelqu'un qui se balade sous une ligne téléphonique.
Oui, je sais bien. Je sais bien, mais la question c'est... Attendez, alors, ok. Ouais, je vais faire ça, mais ça... Okay, I have to do the muting of microphones myself, but this is going to take a while. If I can actually, I'm not sure I can actually do that. Otherwise, yes, it is very, very disturbing. I think we're just about all set now. I don't see a mic that's really open. A few more, everybody could just do that. Okay. Let's see if the problem is solved. Yeah, I think the problem is solved now. Okay, thank you, Francois. A lot easier, isn't it, for everybody? Okay, let me just get back to the beginning of this one point I was making. I was talking about this very broad trend, partly relying on EdTech, but also separate from it or larger than it, which is the trend of smoothening the learning process, of making studying and learning ever easier for an ever increasing number of students, in part, indeed, by relying on the use of technology and on the use of data to customize programs, to customize learning paths to the needs and capabilities of individual students. This trend does fit into a broader one that has been developing over the past 20 years, and that's the overall lowering of academic standards, both in terms of admission and graduation requirements, in particular through grade inflation across universities in many countries. This is what I call in the report graduating on the cheap, leading on the whole to a significant devaluation of the university education. Finally, the report also talks about the increasing focus in university programs and curricula on the imperative of employability, the drive to expand programs that are promoted as imparting skills directly transferable to the workplace, and even to transform existing programs that were not primarily designed to do that into programs that now do. Beyond the overwhelming shift toward STEM disciplines that this move implies, which I had already underscored in the previous report, the 2018 report, I argue in the 2019 report that what may be at stake in the near future is the very survival of academic fields widely included in the category of the humanities, and in particular the social sciences, not to mention what this may be doing in the perhaps medium term to the time-old mission of universities as places where knowledge may be pursued, acquired, expended on for its own sake, for the simple love of knowledge. Once again, what I put the emphasis on through the review of these various ongoing transformations is the fact that as of yet, there is no clearly demonstrated advantage to the growing use of these technologies in higher education. No clearly demonstrated advantage, I mean, in terms of enhancing, in terms of increasing the quality of the learning and teaching experience. In short, these transformations are primarily driven by a market logic, whether it be on the part of universities seeking to increase revenue by expanding enrollments, retention and graduation rates, or on the part of the EdTech industry with its aggressive marketing techniques, seeking to increase profit. On the other hand, a growing number of studies are beginning to show adverse effects on learners of the expanding dependency on devices and screens. These studies range from very alarmist, predicting basically gloom and doom on the ability of future students to concentrate on contents and retain valuable knowledge, to the more benign, which at best express skepticism as to the possibility of long-term gains in learning outcomes. We now come to the question of how, in the already fast-moving landscape of these transformations, the coronavirus pandemic is likely to affect higher education. So this will be my second part in this talk. The first thing I want to say is, of course, self-evident. You can well imagine that it's still very early to make pronouncements or even simply assess what medium to long-term impact the crisis is going to have on the structure and mode of operation of many universities and colleges across the world. All we can do for now is basically watch this sweeping movement, this tidal wave really, of measures that have been put in place by governments worldwide to counter the pandemic, and in particular the lockdowns and closings of schools and universities, for what now seems sure to be, in most cases, the remainder of the spring semester. We watched the higher education landscape, the way that so many institutions of higher learning have had, in record time, ready or not, to close campuses, send most of their students back home, move countless courses online, and adapt in multiple other ways to a crisis which has spread through the planet at wildfire speed. But even as we watch these developments, and while the crisis is still far from over, we can already see what questions this dramatic, unforeseen situation is raising across the field of higher education. Questions such as, will this event bring about a permanent change in the character of higher learning? Will it cause institutions that were already struggling financially before the crisis to simply close down? Will online education that has already been expanding at lightning speed over the past decade soon become the norm? Will the face-to-face, or at least the residential model of higher education where it exists, even survive? What will this do to the teaching profession and to research? How will administrative positions at the university be affected, with millions upon millions of professionals across the board and across the planet now already working from home? Well, it's of course not possible to answer all of these questions just now. I want to focus here on a handful of specific points. And then, as I indicated before, attempt to connect what can be observed to some of the assessments I proposed in the 2019 report. So in the second part, I'm going to briefly explore, I'll show you one slide if I can find it, just listing the three topics I'm going to focus on briefly. Okay, this is the problem with shared screen. Okay, there it is. Okay, so this is, these are the covers that I guess you did not see previously when I tried to show them. Okay, this is the cover of the 2019 report, and this is the cover of the single volume actually, that has both reports, the 2018 and the 2019. Now, what I'm going to focus on in the second part is these three topics. First, what the impact of the pandemic may do to the online versus face-to-face teaching and learning model. Second, how the status of teaching staff will be affected. And three, what implications there might be for the broader financial situation of many universities, especially those that operate on the basis of tuition revenue and endowments, and what this may entail for them in terms of adaptability to the post-coronavirus landscape. First, online versus face-to-face. Of course, the question of whether the pandemic will lead to an acceleration or even a generalization of online learning. What we do see now, at any rate, is that for countless universities and students still operating mainly on the traditional face-to-face model, the
Hello?
I think we have to mute an additional, I'll stop the share. We have to mute an additional mic here, or a few more. Okay. While I do that, I'll try to continue. That background noise is just not compatible with, okay. Here we are. Okay, I think that takes care of it. That, of course, you could individually unmute if you wish to speak, but as I said at the beginning, I think it'll be much more orderly and efficient if you have questions by the end of the talk, you ask them via the chat in writing. So online versus face-to-face. what we can already observe is that the very abrupt transition to online learning has been a rather difficult one across the board. Many observers insist, and rightly so, that this massive sudden transition to online teaching is not representative of the benefits that online education, conceived and designed as such, can offer. And there's no doubt that quickly moving online courses that were structured, quickly moving online courses that were structured to be taught in the classroom is probably not indicative of what these courses could provide in the quality of their contents, their structure, the way that they're built, and learning outcomes if they had been originally carefully designed to be dispensed online. But a broader point here might be that a significantly growing number of universities, having seen the potential in cost savings and the ability to reach a wider student population, in many cases now dispersed back home across the world anyway, will want to vastly expand their online offer, again, primarily on the basis of a cost-saving, tuition revenue increasing logic. And this could lead to a broad, even overall virtualization of higher education. And that would take us back to the classic online versus face-to-face debate, which has been rising among higher education professionals for several years, but this time on a widely magnified scale. While a minority of voices express the view that the recent flight to online learning will in fact have the opposite effect. In other words, will serve to reinforce the value of face-to-face learning and therefore of direct interaction between teachers and learners. My 2019 report addresses this broad debate and calls on higher education professionals across the board to join in and expand this conversation in light of what research, as I've said before, already reveals about the possible adverse effects of a massive switch to online and tech-reliant higher education in general. Second point, this debate naturally ties into the question of the future status of teaching staff. Already many colleges in the US and in Europe have announced hiring freezes in an environment where, as of 2018, for example, some 60% of all college instructors in the US were already adjuncts, including countless graduate students. And as the availability of tenure track positions has been steadily eroding over the past decade or two, some observers are now raising the question of whether universities, as a result of the pandemic, may become employers similar to those of the gig economy, in which most or almost all future instructors will hop from one short contract to another with no social protection, no mobility prospect, and so on and so forth. How this, if it happens, may also affect the status and state of research at the university is an additional question, and certainly not less significant than that of how the quality of teaching may be affected in the future by these changes. All in all, these trends may spell out the end of the pedagogical and critical missions of the university altogether. The question of the changing status of teaching staff in turn ties into that of the financial sustainability of universities and how it will be affected in accelerated fashion by the pandemic. As the crisis seems even now to be impacting the revenue and this ability to spend of countless universities across the world, it's of course still too early to tell how the pandemic is already affecting enrollments and admissions for the next academic year, starting in September, this coming September. But the trends we can already observe, some of which I've mentioned, such as hiring freezes, the likely drop in revenue, which some predict will be dramatic as a result of the crisis, the financial attractivity of the reliance on adjuncts and on an expansion of the online offer, the growing investment in programs that are likely to produce revenue at the expense of others, and many other ways in which institutions of higher learning will be inclined to curtail spending and increase earnings. All of these trends, if they do accelerate in the near future because of the pandemic, will probably result not only in a deeper, faster transformation of the structure and overall mission of higher education, but also really dictate the terms of which universities will survive and which will not. And undoubtedly, those institutions that, to begin with, will not be able to face the initial investments and restructuring that some of these transformations will require, will simply just not be able to remain relevant in the fast transforming landscape of higher education tomorrow. To conclude, I simply want to stress again the obvious. In other words, that adaptability will be the key to the near future of many universities and colleges. On the whole, it is unlikely that the COVID-19 pandemic will radically transform the field of higher education in ways that are completely novel, completely new, and could not have been predicted. But it's almost certain to accelerate and expand the development of trends that have been in the making for several decades, and in particular, the pervasive reliance on EdTech and online education that has been growing exponentially over the past 10 years, which, as a final word, takes me back again to my 2019 report, where I do explore and underscore some of these trends with the hope that this report will, all in all, have been an endeavor that among IFCU members and beyond can stir a debate on where we're actually going with all this, which I believe so far has not been dominant in the circles of higher education professionals. So thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for the little chaotic moments here and there. That concludes what I want to say for today. If any of you have any question, I guess one option is to open your mic and ask your question directly by voice, or I can see already 7. Okay, these are not questions, but okay, mute the microphone. Very, very wise. Yeah, okay. You can send questions through the same channel, through the chat if you want, if you have any, or again, unmute your mic and then ask your questions. If not, if there are no questions, then I'll just transition over to Francois, our General Secretary. Francois, you there?
Yes.
Okay, so over to you with your special announcement. And again, thank you, everybody, for your attention.
Corinne, perhaps you want to respond to the questions, no?
I don't see any questions on the chat.
Okay.
Let me see. No, I don't see any questions. There were remarks about the need to mute mics, which was done eventually, but I don't see any questions.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Corinne, for your commitment and this very interesting online session. I just want to add perhaps 2 information, although I understand that in these uncertain and unprecedented times, all of you have many other priorities with trying to balance personal and professional life from home. However, I want to share with you some interesting and topical content from across the IFCU activities programs over the coming few months. In October in Rome, the 12th and 13th, IFCU will organize its first international forum about internationalization of Catholic universities and risk. As you know, our universities are facing now many risks, of course, financial risk, but also reputational risk. And with the coronavirus crisis, we can see the emergence of a third risk with which we will now learn to live. And this concerns information and health protection for people on campuses, the management of student and teacher mobility, the information and the role that our establishments from a social responsibility perspective can play in their immediate and international environment. And so it is in this context of new risk that IFCU is led to reflect on the emergent in the managerial teams of our universities of the function of risk manager. And this subject will be central during our forum Internationalization, Rising Risk Catholic Universities, which will be held in Rome on October the 12th and the 11th and the 12th. And so you will receive a link to register next week, but you can already inform your managerial teams about this event. In addition, I would like also to inform you that IFCU has created a collaborative platform that allows your universities to be directly connected to each other and to share your requests, your calls for projects, and so on. Here again, we will send you a link to the site and the dates of 2 online sessions that we will organize to assist you in this process for your universities. I just remind you that it is free for university members of IFCU. So it's all for me. Once more, I would like to thank you for your presence, and I hope to see many of you for our next session. Thank you, and thank you, Corinne.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Wala
Thank
lang.
you very much.
You're welcome. Pleasure.